Sure.
Okay, welcome and thanks for joining us for today's boys lacrosse breakout. It's entitled Settled Coverages and Transition Mechanics, and it will be presented by Kyle Smoos of the Grand Rapids Area Lacrosse Officials Association. Kyle, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Just good evening to everybody. Looking forward to doing this presentation. I'm a registered MHSAA lacrosse official. I've been working the sport for about 8 years now, and I'm a member of the Grand Rapids Area Lacrosse Officials Association. So tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to go over the settled coverage and transition mechanics. We're going to start doing a 3-man mechanics coverage, which is what we do in the majority of the high school games in the state. And then after that, we'll be touching a little bit on 2-man mechanics. We do a lot of 2-man at the JV level. And then also a lot of our youth games are covered in a 2-man mechanic. So without any further ado, we'll get started. And if anyone has any questions at all along the way, please feel free to chime in and ask. So we will start this out. First thing we're going to start with is the definitions of settled play, what we're talking about. In lacrosse, both teams have 10 field players. One of those field players is a goalie. In settled play, we are talking about having 6-on-6 field players. And in that, we assume that the defending team is always going to have a goalie. So in a settled situation, the defending team will have 7 players on their side of the field, and the attacking team will have 6. But the field players are even at 6-on-6. So that's what we talk about when we're in a settled coverage. The ball is in the attack area, it's across the midline, and think about it much like basketball in a settled play. So the transition play, that's when you have a clearing team. That's the team with the ball in possession, and they're moving the ball upfield. The other team we refer to in lacrosse as the righting team. That is the team that is defending their goal. So those are the the 2 definitions of what we're going to be talking about tonight. We're going to have settled play, and then we're going to have transition. And it's just, think of it much like basketball or hockey. One team is in possession of the ball and attacking the goal, and the other team is defending their goal. So we start out in a 3-man coverage with 3 different positions. The first one is the lead official, and the lead official is the official that will be closest to the goal in settled play. His primary responsibility is going to be the goal itself, the goal and the goal crease. Okay, much like hockey, have an area outside of the goal that only the goalie can be in, or someone on his team can run through that legally, but no one from the attacking team can ever be in the crease legally when the ball is live. His position is referred to as goal line extended. We call that GLE for short, and that is a position outside of the goal, but even with the goalpost. And he will set up there. That gives him a good view of the goal and of the goal crease. Once he is at that position, he's going to adjust that position in and out. Think of it like being on a string. And as the ball goes away from him, he can get closer to the goal. The ball comes towards him, he will back out. One thing that he wants to be aware of is never to have offensive players in possession of the ball get behind him. So that's why he will always back out when the ball comes his way. He also has the end line, the line behind the goal, for any ball that goes out of bounds, whether either on a pass or on a shot. That is going to be his. That's going to be his call on who's going to get possession. In lacrosse, on a shot, the ball that goes out the back line or sideline on any shot, the player closest to the ball, when and where it goes out, that team will be awarded possession. So you can be in possession of the ball and take a shot, and the ball goes out of bounds. And if one of your players is closest to when and where it goes out of bounds, without being out of bounds themselves, they will get possession. So you'll see players chase the ball out of bounds on a shot. One of the things that position requires, if there is play behind the goal, that lead official needs to sink down towards that end line so he's in a better position to make a call. We have some diagrams coming up a little bit further in the presentation, and that will help you understand what we're talking about. So that's the basic coverage for the lead official in settled play. Next, we'll talk about the single official. The single official is an official, as it says, is a single. He has one side of the field by himself. He is opposite the two team benches. So he was what we refer to as, he is a far side official. He will, in settled coverage, come down and set up, generally, as a loose rule of thumb, anywhere from 2 to 5 yards above the crease, above the goal line and above the crease. And his primary responsibilities are that action in front of the goal crease. He is helping out the trail official with action around that crease, and the lead official as well. That single official, as he's coming up the field, he has all the counts, the clearing counts as well, with the exception of a 4-second goalie count. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we get further in the presentation. As far as any balls that go out of bounds, he is responsible for only his sideline. The end line behind the goal is always going to be the lead official's call. The only time that single will come in and help out on that is if the lead official maybe is screened by players, doesn't get a good view of it. He will look to that single official for some help on that end line if he needs to. But he generally just has the one far sideline as far as responsibility when the ball goes out of bounds. One of the very important things that a single official has is when we do have contested play behind the goal, and that lead official has to sink down to cover that, our single now has to slide down to our GLE, our goal line extended, and he has to cover that goal. Okay, so he's taking the lead's place and the lead's responsibility now, because the lead had to go down to cover that. And quite often in the game of lacrosse, that lead will go down, and if a player makes a quick pass to the top of the crease to one of his players, we get a shot. And if the single doesn't come down, we have no one covering that goal. So that's a very important responsibility of that single official. And then the other thing is too, you have to be aware when you're in that position to help rule on an over and back. Once the ball in lacrosse has been put into the attack end of the field, an offensive player can't throw the ball back to a teammate. If the teammate misses it and it goes over midfield, we now have an over and back situation. They have to keep it in their end. So that single is going to help with that, going to make sure that that ball wasn't touched by a defender, in which case then we would not have an over and back. So he's going to help out with that call. So there's quite a bit of responsibility in that single official's area. He's helping, anywhere from the goal all the way back to the midline if necessary. So a lot of ground to cover there. That is the most physically demanding spot of the three positions. If you're on the single side and you're there for any length of time, you will get tired because it's a lot of running on that side of the field. And then lastly, we go to the trail official. And the trail official is exactly what it sounds like. He is the last official up the field. And his responsibility, and whenever you take any training in lacrosse, if you go to any clinics or anything like that, they drill into your head, you have the man in possession of the ball. So you have what we refer to as the passer or the shooter. If you have an offensive player with a ball in his cross, he's either going to pass that ball at some point or he's going to shoot it. Either way, you have him. If any of you guys do football, think of it as the referee when he has the quarterback, when the quarterback is passing the ball. That's your guy. And what you're really looking for there in that position is, do we have any late hits, any unnecessary hits that happen after that player either passes or shoots the ball? That's your number one responsibility. So you're not watching the shot. We have a single who can help, but we have the lead official who is primary at the goal. So you do not follow the shot. One of the more difficult things to do, just like a good referee in football doesn't watch the pass. He watches the quarterback after the ball is gone. So you should not be following that shot to the goal if you're a trail. While being a trail official, you are responsible for the bench sideline. And whenever there's going to be a time serving foul, that penalty will be relayed to you because you are closest to the table area where that foul is reported. And then you will turn and give the player number and the team that the foul is on, and then also the time that needs to be served. You're also watching in a settled situation as the trail, the high crease area, and you're looking at the midfield as well. And we'll talk a little bit about this when we get the diagram up. It will show the trail over towards the sideline a little bit, over towards the wing line. One of the best pieces of advice that I got in a training that I attended was to sometimes move more towards the center of the field. And by the center, I don't mean the exact center, but just come in a little bit further. You get a very good view of the top of the crease and the action that's happening in front of it. What you're looking for are any moving picks. Think of basketball once again. The player's feet can't be wider than his shoulders. He can't lean in to pick off a defensive player. That's the kind of action that you're looking for when you're a trail. And then also, as we talked about earlier with the over and back call, you will be primary on that over and back call. If your single sees that there was a pass that was not touched by a defender, ball going towards the midfield, you're going to, a lot of times you'll hear the single yelling over, which he's just telling you if the ball goes over, we have an over and back. If the ball's been touched, he may yell tip, that the ball's been tipped. So then we know we do not have an over and back, but that call is going to be made by the trail official. So Michael, I see you on there. Are you currently a lacrosse official?
Hi, yeah, I'm a lacrosse official. I just started last year, so I'm one of the newest guys in the state, as far as I know.
Oh, great. What part of the state are you in?
I'm in Saline, Michigan, just south of Ann Arbor.
Oh, okay. All right. So you're over on the east side then.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Have you been able to do any high school games?
Yeah, I had quite a few last season, so probably around, I don't know, 5 to 10 varsity level games and a little more than that JV.
Oh, great. Excellent. Yeah, that was one thing we weren't short of is games for officials.
That's true.
Anywhere in the state. Well, Michael, if you have any questions at all, like I said earlier, during the presentation, don't hesitate to ask. Do you have anything over what we've covered so far?
No, it sounds good so far. So just
Okay.
it's things that I've heard before, but I'm hearing it again and making sure I remember.
In a lot of the slides, the presentation here, that I put up, a lot of these are out of some of the training manuals that I've had for a couple of clinics that I've attended. And they're just, I mean, as you can tell, by no means does it cover everything that you could possibly come into, but these are just the basics, in a 3-man coverage. So, and I found too, attending this kind of stuff, I always have my phone, and when I get these things come up in a PowerPoint, I'm always taking a picture of them. So I have them, and that's actually one of the things I use for a pregame. To go back and go through those slides just to remind you of some of the simple things that sometimes you forget as an official. So
right, makes sense.
So yeah, that's one of the things we do. But well, we can move on here. You can see the next diagram is the settled coverage. The black dot at the end line is representing the ball, and you can see that lead official has now sunk down about halfway between goal line extended and the end line. Now, sometimes you're going to find that you have to sink a little bit lower than that. One thing to be aware of when the ball is that low is obviously they're going to try to ride that player out of bounds. So if that's the case, and especially if he's going to be double teamed down there, I would suggest that you sink a little bit lower than what is shown on that diagram, just to help out, because the action down there can happen very, very quick. And we obviously always have to be aware of, how did that player get ridden out of bounds? If he got pushed in the back, we now have a, push with possession. We have a foul. You can't push him out of bounds, in the back. So,
Sure.
But he can be ridden out of the bounds, from the side or from the front. So very, very easily we can get a turnover there. A legal check can put him out of bounds and the ball turns over.
So the lead would be closer to that end line to really watch it.
Yeah, I would, Michael. And the one thing too, like you see him in the attack area in this diagram. In the diagram, it's fine. But when you start looking at, and it depends too, here's a black dot at the end line. So obviously we're not viewing a player. Is that player moving towards us, or is he moving away from us? If he's moving away from us, you can probably stay about where you are in that diagram. And you're probably going to get a really good look at that. If he's coming towards us, I'm probably continuing that 45-degree angle there, and I'm going towards the corner of the field. I'm backing down and I'm backing out. And I'm going to let that action, come by me or come past me. If you stay where you're at right there, a lot of times that offensive player, if he can break free, he's going to come up and he now is going to use you as a pick. Okay. And you're in a bad spot because you're going to be in someone's way, whether his way or the one or two guys chasing him, which is where you do not want to find yourself. So I would continue on that angle in the diagram, to just keep backing up, which is going to put you towards the corner, the bottom corner of the field, and then let that action come past you. You're able to view all the players, in that situation. And it's easy to come up, in that situation. Very easy to come up and get where you need to be if he comes up and around. The trail official, that's the position I referenced a little bit earlier. You can see he's almost, on that wing line. And one of the pieces of advice that I found over the years to be very helpful is to go about halfway from where that tee is right now, where the trail is, to the cage. So you're going to move, if you're in a football field, which oftentimes we find ourselves, you're going to come inside the hash, okay? And one of the things to talk about here too, and this is where we have to be honest with our abilities. I'm now 55 years old, so I don't run as fast as I used to. I can still run okay, but certainly not like I could when I was 25. How close you get to the top of the box is really dependent on what kind of foot speed you have, but then also too the level of play that you are officiating, because there are teams that struggle to clear the ball and there are others that clear it extremely well. They pass the ball up and that ball's down in the other end in 2 or 3 seconds. And you always want to adjust yourself based on those factors. How well do I run? And if this other defensive team gets the ball, are they a team that likes to get out and run and get down the field? So that position right there is a great place to set up. but you want to continue to move with the play as well. So then we'll proceed here to the next slide. And one thing that we have here, I tried to put together in all of these, just some good habits to get yourself into. The first one is what we hear in a lot of sports. I'm also a football official. I'm an umpire, and the first thing I do is count in your pre-snap read. But you want to make sure in a settled coverage, we have time, okay? Let's make sure we do have 6-on-6 out there as far as the field players, all right? So be alert for substitutions. What we talk about, if we do have substitutions, are the players matching feet? And by that means, if an offensive player is running off the field, if they're playing a man-to-man defense, is that defensive player also running off with him and subbing out? So you'll hear once in a while, teams yelling match feet. Well, that means if one guy goes, another guy's going to go. So now we have to have, if we have a red and a blue player, we have to have one red and one blue is going to be coming on. Okay. The other thing, every lacrosse official's favorite color is yellow. Yellow means the offense is going to settle and they're going to substitute. And in a settled play, that is exactly the kind of offense that they're running. Okay, they're settled. They want to get the players that they feel give them the best opportunity to score on the field. And so when that's going on, that's really not a time for us to relax. It's a time for us to do all the things that we need to make sure that we're all doing. We're going to count players. The other thing to do, which I find myself, I constantly have to tell myself to do this, because to be quite honest, a lot of times down the field, I don't do it. And it's something you really have to put in your head. And that is, the defense can only have 4 long poles, okay, out there at one time. And the trick to that is not always to count the long poles. If we have 6 players out there and only 4 of them can have long poles, if you can find the 2 guys with the short poles, you're good, because they can have more than 2 guys out there with short poles, but they just can't have more than 4 out there with longs. So a lot of times what we want to try to do in those situations is find the shorties, find the 2 short sticks. And if we have 2 short sticks out there and we have 6-on-6, we are good. We are good. And that's it's just something you have to put in your head, because that is something that is not often done. And if you talk to even a lot of very veteran officials, and in an honest moment, they'll tell you that's not something I do all that often. So it's just a good habit to get into. And then this is the thing too, it's to all officials, but more to the trail official. Be aware of the clock. A lot of times we're on fields that maybe only have a clock on one end. How much time is left in the quarter? Also, early in the game, when we're trying to determine what kind of teams we have, do we have a team that is very deliberate, takes its time on offense? Okay, well, that's fine, but they can't basically run a stall out there. So we want to be aware of the clock when they come across midfield and make sure that they are, attacking the goal, that they're actually making an attempt to score. Obviously, that is something we want to talk about in a pregame as officials, and we're going to have a signal for that if we start to think, hey, we want to start talking to these guys and tell them you've got to attack the goal, because you're just running off time. The next thing to be aware of would be what we hear in so many other sports as well: officiate the defense. I know when I'm a trail official, and so I have passer shooter, and oftentimes the defender may be 8 to 10 yards away from that player, and he's coming up to defend him. The very first thing I do is I check his hands. How are his hands on the cross? If his hands are 3 feet apart, his hands are bad, so he's suspect already. All right, he can't really do much legally with that stick, unless he just makes contact with just the gloved hand, which you see a lot in college, but most high school players are not quite as skilled yet to be able to play defense like that. As always, we see where are his feet. Is he positioned well in front of the offensive player, or is he off to the side? And then lastly, if we're watching this, if we do get either someone running away from a defender or going towards the goal, is that defender in chase mode? If he's in chase mode, he's suspect because he's beat. So you're watching his stick, maybe for some illegal contact, or you're watching for possibly a push as well. And then lastly, this is one thing that I try to do myself a lot to help me out is, remember, we have one team that cannot go through the crease. And obviously that changes every time we go up and down the field. And you want to remind yourself which team is bad, which team can't go through the crease. So if green is the riding team and is defending, we have to tell ourselves, green is bad. And I mean, I'll sometimes even say it out loud to help myself remember it on that time down the field in settled play. That, you know what, that guy can't step through the crease. And it sounds like something that would be very, very simple to always know. It is not. Sometimes you find yourself forgetting that. And sometimes we have teams that have colors that are very similar. So, we want to make sure that we know who can and who cannot go through that crease. So those are just things. By no means are they everything as far as good habits, but it's just a few of them to remember when we are in settled coverage, because we have time. The teams are being deliberate here, so we want to make the best use of our time. Move along here to the next one. Oh, I missed one here. Last one, I forgot to click, is communicate with players. This is a great time to talk to the players, especially when the ball's away. When the ball's away, that's a good time. Remember, if they're doing something correctly, defender's playing really good position defense. He's not thrusting with the cross. He's moving his feet really well. Let him know. Hey, great job moving your feet. Great job keeping your hands together. Offensive player, good job keeping two hands on the stick so we don't have a potential award. Don't be afraid to communicate with the players. If you do see something, especially early, that you would like to see someone doing a little bit better, maybe a defender, long pole is being a little loose with the stick. He's not quite getting the stick or the gloved hand on the stick. Let him know he's got to tighten that up. We want to send those messages out to the players so we don't have to, throw a flag and put guys in the box. So those are the things that I wanted to put in the presentation. Things to remember. These are things that a lot of times I've got from other guys. They've told me that it's helped me a lot, and that I try to put into my game as well. So we've got a little bit here on restarts in settled play. If we have a ball that goes out of bounds during settled play, the first thing we have to know is where did it go out, so we know where we're going to restart, and then two, how did it go out? And by that, was it a shot? So are we watching who was closest to when and where it went out of bounds to determine that, or was it just an errant pass? And if it was an errant pass, make sure that the ball wasn't tipped during flight, so we know where we want to restart. Remember, and this is one of the things that we have to explain often to new people to lacrosse, it is when and where it went out of bounds. So geometry does come into play. Even though someone was closest to the end line does not mean they were closest to where the ball went out of bounds when it went over the end line. As we know, often the goalie, if there's no one behind the cage and the shot goes just off the side of the cage, the closest person to the ball when it went out of bounds was the goalie. So you'll hear that call often in a game if a team's not backing up your shots. In settled coverage, we have to be solid in mechanics on who has what line. Like I said, the single has the far side, the lead has the end line, and then the trail has the sideline nearest the bench. So those are going to be the lines, the guys who are going to be making those calls. On the restart, as a general rule, if it went out over the line you're responsible for, you're going to be the one that whistles it in. Sometimes you have situations where you want to give that whistle up, where you want, maybe if you're the trail, it went down right off GLE, and my lead official is going to be outside the box anyway because he doesn't want to be in the way play restarting, and you may have him restart it. If that's the case, if you just like in a lot of other sports, if you want the whistle, point to yourself. If you want to give it up when it really should be yours, if you want to give it to your partner and say, no, I'd rather have you restart, make sure you're pointing to him so everyone knows who's going to restart that. And this is something I got from a very veteran official that has helped myself out tremendously. I always try to remember this. When we're coming out of a timeout, if we have say we have a shot out of bounds and someone wants to get a timeout, or the ball is just out of bounds, in that sense, the riding team would be awarded it if it was just a bad pass. But for some reason, they want to call a timeout. When you're going to restart that, let your player know that you give the ball to who is going to be restarting him. Okay, a lot of times you might be starting up top, and if you're the single official, you may be holding the ball. You just grabbed it after the timeout. And so the player comes over and he's going to restart over near you. You may want to go down on top of that crease and get set up because maybe there's only 7 seconds left to go in the quarter. And that they're not going to do much with that ball, but shoot it. They're going to get the ball and they're going to go right to the goal. So in that case, you're going to want to give up that whistle and your trail will now take it. So make sure you inform the player that you're giving the ball to. I want to put the ball in your cross. I'm going to run down here and the official behind you is going to start you. So that whistle is going to be behind you. And that has helped a lot because especially in a situation like we just described, or it might be a short, time left in a quarter, that they're gonna go and they're gonna want to score. So we want everyone to know what's going on. Okay, and don't be afraid to be loud about that. So that the defense know. You know what I mean? That's going to be who's going to be restarting them as well. So those are the things that I had for restarts in settled coverage. So I see we got someone new just came in. Any questions so far on anything that we've went over?
No, I appreciate it.
Okay. All right, now go here. So now we're going to go into transition coverage, and transition coverage is just what it says. We're moving, right? The ball is being moved up the field. We have not crossed the midline, and we have an attacking team and we have a riding team. If you're the new lead official, so now remember, you're the old trail official. Okay, you went from now being a trail official to being a lead official because the ball is turned and went the other way. You want to anticipate that change, but you don't. Before you do anything, you want to make sure that we have a change of possession. Okay, you can start backing towards the other goal a few steps in anticipation, but by all means, stay pointed towards that. That play and know that we have that we have had a possession change. If the clearing team is moving up slowly, they're very deliberate moving the ball up, the general rule of thumb is to keep a couple lines in between you, and that could be as we've listed here, the restraining line and the midfield line and goal line extended. You're trying to keep that cushion, and generally speaking, that's about a 20-25 yard cushion in a slow clear. If you are the lead official and it's a slow clear, make sure you look upfield and count and pick up your players to see how many players as they cross the midline are able to come over midfield, so we don't have a problem with offsides. Now, if we have a clearing team that is on a fast break, a team that likes to play fast, they'll pass the ball up and they run, they've got some good speed. You've got to turn and you've got to sprint because you've got to get to the goal line because you have the goal. And the one thing we never want to do, much like a back judge in football, you do not want to be beat to the goal line. You want to be to the goal before the ball gets to the goal. Okay, so we're in good position to rule on anything that may happen by that goal or in that goal crease. And anyone that's either been to a lacrosse game or has officiated in any lacrosse knows that teams that like to run It does not take very long at all for a good team to get that ball from its defensive end of the field to its offensive end of the field. I mean, they can pass it, and they can pass that ball much quicker than what we can run. So if you're that new lead and they want to go fast, you really have to work hard at getting down to your position at goal line extended. In transition, that single side official, he's going to hold the same as the new lead would be, the old trail, and make sure that we have a change of possession. Okay. Once he knows that, he's going to go towards the midfield cone. Also remember, when you are that single side official in a three-man mechanic, you have the advancement counts. So you have the 20-second clearing count, and then you have the 10-second count once the ball is possessed across the midline to get into the attack box for a touch. So you want to make sure that there is possession, and then you can start your timer, but you need to get to the cone. You're going to get to that cone once again if it's a slow clear, and you're going to observe a lot of the players. You're going to start getting player counts. You're going to be kind of primary for offsides because the trail has the ball and the lead's going to go up and get the goal line. So you're going to be the main person looking for offsides. If we have a problem with too many players in the offensive end. And remember, with that, we're always counting forward. We don't count players behind us. We count what's going on in front of us. Once that ball crosses midline, now you have the 10-second count. They have to, to get it in and get a touch in 10 seconds. So we don't have a turnover violation there. If it is a fast break, you are not going to be stopping at the cone because you're going to be running to help the new lead, and you're going to try to get yourself in your offensive position as quickly as you can. Once again, you're going to, you're still going to be responsible for getting a player count, but it's more important in a fast break situation that you get down in your offensive position so you can help out on anything that happens near the crease. That's just a little more of a priority in that situation. And then lastly, in the three-man, we have the trail official in this situation in transition, who was the old lead. We call that position or that official the on official. That means he has the ball. So once again, think passer and shooter, okay? And you're going to stay with that guy, even though he's in the defensive, his defensive end of the field, just like you would if he were in his offensive end. Okay, a lot of times we get late hits or our unnecessary hits happen on a clear, okay, after the ball has been passed. So it's just as important that you stay with that player a few seconds after he throws that ball on a clear as it is if he's down in settled coverage and he's in his own offensive end of the field. You want to establish wide position so you can stay out of the way of the players. And you're going to move your way up the field. You don't need to be in a hurry. You're not going to rarely will you ever find yourself sprinting as a trail. Even if on a fast break, you're still going to be very deliberate on the way you come up. You want to keep, as a general rule, about a 10-yard cushion behind that advancing player. And the reason for that is, remember, one errant pass and we're going back the other way. And you're now the lead and you have to get back to that goal. So, you would rather keep yourself a little bit behind that play than to be too close to it. As you're coming up as a trail, you also can help with counting players, all right? Your main objective there as a trail official is to, like I said, just to watch for all the late stuff that can happen when the ball is being advanced up the field. You're going to also observe the substitution box. Make sure that teams are substituting legally, that the players are off the field before the new player comes on. And then once those substitutions are complete, you're going to move up and establish your spot in the offensive end. The one thing to remember too, when we were talking about counts, is when you're the trail official, if that ball goes into the crease, whether it be a goalie that has a save or a pass that goes into the goalie. Once that goalie has possession, he has 4 seconds. Make that a very deliberate 4 seconds. We do not want to be calling that 4-second call too quickly. Be very deliberate with that. But he has 4 seconds to get it out of the crease. And then remember too, it can be passed out of the crease. If it comes back and is passed back into the crease, he gets another 4 seconds, okay, to get rid of it. Sometimes on a clear, the goalie will pass it out and the guy gets in trouble and he passes it right back into the goalie, and the goalie happens to be in the crease. So just remember that that is that's a new 4-second count.
And it's a generous 4 seconds, right?
Well, and here's the thing on a shot, right? So we go back to what do? It's kind of like your pre-snap in a football. Okay, so we have a shot and that goalie makes a save. Okay, I have a save. I'm the lead, but who's going to now be a trail. And I go up to signal that we have a change of possession. You can do the twirl. Some guys do that. Some guys will yell, reset or whatever. Usually I'll do a twirl to represent that we have a turnover and we're now going to go the other way. So you have that. And then this is something that you'd have in a 2-man, but you'd have the twirl, you turn down, hit your timer, and now you start your goalie count. And that's much quicker. Most goalie counts are much quicker to a 5.5 or 6 second in reality than a 4 second. If you're doing everything correctly. And the thing with that is too, you're doing that exact same timing for both teams. So one team isn't getting, more out of that count than the other one. You're like, if I'm doing, if it's really a 5 or 5.5 seconds on that turnover on each end of the field, both teams are going to get it. So yes, it is very, very deliberate. We don't like 4-second crease calls. Now, once in a while you get them. The team plays, great defense, and they're, and the goalie's goofing around a little longer than he should, and we get one. Well, then they've earned that. But if they're just clearing and getting it out of there, and it's definitely something that we don't want to be too tight on that time. We moved here to the next slide, and you can see our positioning here. This is just a basic setup, and you can see that single and lead and the trail. That would be more like a settled coverage, traditional positioning. So now if we have a turnover, that single is going to go out to the cone. That the trail, who's going to be now the new lead, he's going to move up the field. In this situation, be going to your left, and then that lead is going to become the new trail. So we hit the button there and you can see what's going on just like that. So you're going to go to the cone if you're the single, set up, take care of your responsibilities there, and then you're going to advance down to the offensive end, and then you're going to see, the old trail, the new lead is going to come up and he's going to get to GLE, and then your trail is setting up right there just outside the attack box out near the wing line. One thing to note there on that diagram, that's a very good positioning for the lead and single. That's about where that single wants to be, up on that high crease area. Sometimes the singles, you'll find that guys stop a little short of that. They're much closer to the top of the box. And it's really better if you can get down a little bit lower, especially when we get play that goes behind that goal and that lead has to sink and you have to pick up the goal line. It's much better that you're, 2 or 3, 4 steps away from that goal line, and you just got to sink down and help him pick that up. So, so that's a very good diagram right there, showing that. And I just hit it again. I want to go to the next slide. There we go. Transition coverage. This is more, you can see where the ball is in this one, in this diagram. The ball's that black dot in the center. And you can see that trail right now. He's maybe even a little slightly behind that ball. And the single has got up almost to the midline, almost to the cone. And then your lead must be really fast because he's already down to GLE. So he's already down where he needs to be. But that's kind of the triangle that we talk about, where we're keeping guys, in that triangle where we're getting a good look at them. And the single, a lot of times that single in the trail, they're picking up the player in possession of the ball. And they're really helping out, because if that ball goes over to that single side and that clear goes up that sideline, obviously the single, if he's backing out and giving himself a good cushion there, he's got a great view of any player, especially if that player is going through a double team. He's got a much better view of that many times than what the trail does, who is technically primary on that player clearing the ball. So those two are going to work in tandem on that coverage. In the lead, that's where I say if you are the lead and you get down there early and the ball's coming up deliberately, you can really do your crew a great favor by getting that count in, making sure for offsides, because at that point, if the ball's back behind there and they're advancing it up, deliberately, you've got some time there that you can really help them out and get the count in. And that's always helpful, because the count, we've got 20 players on the field and we only have 3 officials. And to get those counts, and of course with our middies, or if they keep a middie back, anybody can go over that midline as long as you stay on sides. So that's always an important task, that we keep our counts in mind. And then transition coverage here, this is, say they pass it down fast and they all get it to X, which is position behind the goal, and they get the ball back there. That's, once again, just like we had in settled coverage, that lead's going to sink, as is the single. The single is going to go down to GLE. The lead's going to sink down towards the end line, and that trail is still, you can see here, he's outside of the attack box over near the wing line. So that is, once again, you just establish that triangle of coverage. And then here we have, whoops, I'm gonna go back. There we go. Good habit in transition play. As we talked about, measured anticipation, okay, especially for teams that can get up and down the field. Part of being in the best position is anticipating, as the game progresses, what kind of teams you have. Maybe you have 2 teams that like to run, or 2 teams that are very deliberate, or one is one style and one is the other. Which team, if the ball turned over, as a trail, you're asking yourself, okay, if this turns around and I got to go the other way, who's getting the ball? Is it the team that wants to go fast? If it is, I got to know how deep I can get as a trail in my positioning. And then you also have to know, how fast am I going to have to turn around and run? One good piece of advice in anything, whether it's settle or transition, is hustle to your position where you have to get. You can take a breath when you get there, okay? But work at getting to where you need to be first. In transition coverage, this is where we're talking about, mainly this would be the trail and the single side official. Always be alert for the unnecessary hits. And what we want to look for there in that situation, we talk about, are any other players swimming upstream, okay? And that's always going to be, almost always going to be a defensive player, a riding player. If we're going in one direction, is there one guy in the field that's going really fast in the other direction? Doesn't mean he's going to foul, but it certainly means he is a suspect, okay? There's a reason he's going in the opposite direction really fast, okay? He might be lining somebody up. So that's something we always want to, that always should catch your attention when you see one of the guys in the defensive side going the opposite way as everyone else. Why is he doing that? Keep an eye on him. And then the other thing too, in transition, it's a little bit harder to do, but it's important, is to communicate with the players, as they're coming up. Sometimes we'll say that if the ball is passed out and you can see a kid who's, you can tell is thinking about maybe making a hit, let him, ball's gone, ball's away, and let that player know that we know that the ball is gone. Okay, he knows it too. Sometimes when you put that out there, it just helps him control himself, so he doesn't make an unnecessary hit. And then we will slide into 2-man. Before we get into 2-man, Michael, do you have anything with any of the 3-man?
No, there's some good comments in there, especially the swimming upstream. I know I've seen that a couple times, and that's their eyes get focused when they're doing that. So
Yeah, usually when you see someone swimming upstream, they've got one thing on their mind, and it's hitting somebody. And that's, and that's why it's just, like I said, it's not necessary. It's not a foul in and of itself, obviously, but it's an indicator. And oftentimes it can be a very strong indicator of a potential problem. And those are the hits. We are always going to miss calls. We all do. If you miss a generic slash, or you miss, a little bit of a push, those are things you don't want to do, but it's going to happen. But those big hits that are unnecessary, that are late, player launches, leaves his feet, he hits high, we have to get every one of those. We can't miss those. And when you see a player swimming upstream, that's an indicator for that type of hit. So we really have to train our eyes to stay on that. So now we move on to two official mechanic. And we're going to start with the lead official in settled coverage. A lot of the same responsibilities as in 3. You have the goal. You are going to drop below GLE, even if there's only 2 of you. You still have to get below there. If we have contested play behind the goal, your end line responsibility is exactly the same as it was in a 3-man. And once again, you're going to work as close to that crease as you can without interfering with play. You're going to move in and out as play dictates you, without letting offensive players in possession of the ball get behind you. And you are primary for crease violations. The one thing that we'll say with the 2-man is it is a much harder mechanic to cover this game in than a 3-man. We have just as many players, and we have one less set of eyes to cover those. Trail official in settled coverage, same as in a 3, with as far as primary on the passer and shooter. You're watching for any late hits. Remember, you do want to come down a little bit further if your lead has to go below the goal. You're going to have to sink a little bit as well. Maybe right to the top of the box to try to help out with that play around the crease, because we could have a pass from the end line up to the top of the crease and then a shot, and our lead may still be behind the goal if he sinks a little bit. So we've got to slide a little bit to be able to help. And that's where it comes in. You may be able to help with a crease violation on a really tight play in that situation. And then the other here is, they always say, you're not going to signal that goal, but if we do get a situation like the one we just described, we could have a situation where your lead is, he's screened off. He's got no idea that we just had a ball go in the back of the net. And you will, blow it dead and let them know we've got a goal. That's pretty rare. It doesn't happen very often. But that's not to say that it doesn't happen, nor that it couldn't happen. So that's something in a 2-man that you may do. Whereas in a 3-man, that's what your single is going to help for. Between the single and the lead, they're always, going to have that goal covered. And in a 2-man, we're just missing that single side. And both of us in a 2-man are doing a lot more running. So you're going to be a little more fatigued in those situations as well. We just flip to the slide here, and you can just see by the colors as a trail how much of the field, and that's an awful large field, how much of that field you have to cover. And then your lead, has the rest of it. So that's an awful lot of field for 2 guys to have to take care of. So that's one of the things that makes the 2-man considerably more difficult, especially if it's a high school game. Even a JV game makes it much more difficult to cover that field. In 2-man mechanic, in a transition coverage, it's lead, like I said, it's a lot the same as the 3. You got to anticipate that change in direction and get going. You want to keep those same 2 lines between you, like we talked about before. On a fast break, you need to really, really hustle to get to your position. In a slow clear, same as in a 3, you can be a little bit more deliberate. Counting is just tougher in a 2-man. There's just no 2 ways around it. If they're coming up slow, we can catch that. If they're coming up fast, you really are in a tough spot. That doesn't mean that you don't count. It just means you have to be a little more wary of the fact that there's only 2 of you out there counting. So you really have to stay on that.
I know I've gotten myself trouble a couple times on 2-man when I start hearing the coaches yelling that there's an offsides, and they're yelling, and I'm running as hard as I can to start looking out there and I'm trying to count fast.
Yes.
And I miscount, and there wasn't an offsides.
Well, and the other thing is too, you get the kid that runs up to the midline and he acts like he wants to stop and he goes over. Of course, everyone and their brother thinks that he is now offsides. No, he's just over the midline.
Right.
You have to count. Just because he was a player that wasn't going to go over doesn't mean that there's still not a midi back and he's legal. He just doesn't realize that he's still legal. He just realizes he's went over a line that normally he's not able to go over. And that's kind of the joke, right? In lacrosse, when all else fails, you yell offsides. It's much like in football on a long run, right? What do you hear from the team, from the defensive sideline? They're all yelling a hold, right? Whether there was a hold or not, that's all they got left. Yeah, you do hear that a lot. And in a 2-man, getting offsides is incredibly difficult, especially when if they're playing fast and they're coming up and getting over. It's very, very difficult. I mean, you've got one guy who has the goal and you have the other guy who has the ball. And the trail is going to be the guy that more times than not would get the offsides. Well, the trail's not going to give up the passer shooter to turn around and count feet. You know what I mean? And we talk to coaches sometimes and say, it's like this. We're not going to miss, a high cross check to the head on your player in possession because we were turned around counting to see how many toes were at the midline. You know what I mean? It's just, we can't do that.
Yep.
And so it's like, we always say, if only they would pay for another official, we would have 3 out here and that would be a great help. But in a 2-man, it's very, very difficult to get. Now the trail, like I said, these coverages are very similar as they are in the 2-man, is a 3 as far as areas of responsibility and counting players and all of that. The one thing that does change is your timer. In the trail, in a 2-man, you're going to turn your 20-second timer on and you're going to have that 4-second goalie count. And that's where we were talking a little bit earlier, Michael, where we said, really, does that goalie count become a 5 or 6 second count? Sure, it does, because the goalie makes a stop. You raise your hand to give the turnover signal. And then you go down and flip your timer on. Well, you've already spent 1.5 seconds or 2 seconds doing those 2 things. Now you're starting the 4-second count. So he's really got about 6 seconds in a 2-man mechanic to get that ball out of the crease. And it is one of those things when you truly do have one of those counts and you tell a coach, this is what I'm doing. Man, when I give him a 4-second count, he really had a 4-second count. He earned that 4-second violation because honestly, it probably was closer to 5 or 6 seconds, or possibly even more before that ball came out of the crease. So, same thing, stay with your passer and shooter, looking for your unnecessary hits as the trail. And then, once that ball is in the offensive end, go ahead and move up and get in your position to be able to officiate the offense once they're down in their attack end of the field. And then here we have good habit in a 2-man coverage. Because there's only 2 of you, you do have to run more. It's more physically demanding. Be quick, but as I always say, be quick, but don't hurry. Get to your spot. Also, understand communication is really important in the 2-man with both players, coaches, because you're trying to help the players out, by letting them know what they're doing that could potentially get them in trouble. it's going to make your job a little easier if you can have a good communication with those players and let them know when they're doing things very well and doing a good job with it. And then other times when, you want them to correct something that you're not. Understand too, and it's tough because every official wants to be perfect. I mean, we're usually our own worst critics, our own harshest critics. Understand in a two-man in the game of lacrosse, there's a lot of dark spots out there. There are a lot of spots on the field in certain situations that if you said, who has that? The honest answer, no one. 'Cause you can't see it. Like I said, once again, you've got 20 players out there and you've got 2 guys watching them. And just understand that that is a difficult mechanic to work especially a high school lacrosse game in. Very difficult. One thing to know, this is the same for a 3-man too, with your pushes, and this is where we go back to, is a defensive player beat? Do we have an offensive player attacking the goal? And he has beat his defender, and he has now got a line to the goal line, or to the goal, the crease. Remember, the guy who the player is running away from, so normally that's always going to be the trail, he has his back for the push. Did he get pushed? The guy that the player is coming to, the attacking player is coming to, you have his feet. So the lead's going to have his feet. The great thing in a 3-man is, say player is coming from the single side, and boy, do we have it great, because we have a trail watching him, we got a single watch in the back, and we got a lead watching the feet, and we've got them all in a triangle box. So that's a wonderful thing. But just know, if the player is going away from you, you're looking at his back. Don't worry about his feet. You're looking for the push. Okay. You worry about how he got into that crease. If that happens, did he get pushed, or did he just run in there on his own? And the guy who the player is coming towards, you have his feet. Did he actually end up in the crease? Yes or no? That's really important. It's important in the 3-man, but it's really important in a 2-man. That's a good thing to pregame and talk about with your partner. And then the last thing, you mentioned this a little earlier, Michael, in a 2-man, block out the noise. You're going to hear a lot of it, the 2-man. Concentrate on the play that's in front of you. So if you've got settled play, or you have a fast break play, and we have players going to the goal, it's much more important that we cover that goal and that goal crease and the man in possession than somebody's got 2 toes over the midline. And that coach will yell until he's blue in the face that you had an offsides, and you may have. It may have went over. In that instance, it had no bearing on the play. There's no advantage gained in that situation by that player, having a half a step over the midline. Yes, that is a foul. But just know in a 2-man, don't beat yourself up too much on that. We're counting forward and we're watching the play that's in front of us. And there's going to be things that happen behind us. And, when you think about it, we could have had a really bad cross check, or somebody, hit somebody with the butt end of a stick behind us. That's bad. That's terrible. We don't want to miss that, but we can't see it. That's something that's terrible. Toes over a midline, in the grand scheme of things, in a 2-man, not something that we're going to worry too much about. I mean, because there's nothing we can do. We've got to stay with the play. So that's one of the things to remember in a 2-man is you're going to get a lot more noise because you have less eyes out there covering the play, and you just have to block that out. Sometimes it's very difficult to do, but it's something that as an official you want to try to keep your mind on the task in hand that's in front of you. So and that was the last one, and that's the last one. So in the 2-man, Michael, you'd mentioned the offsides. Is there anything else that you see as a new official that you have any questions on when you're working in a 2-man?
I wouldn't say that I have any questions right now. I know something that I have a problem with is switching between the two and remembering where I'm at and what I'm doing. So I'll do a JV game as a 2-man. I feel like I'm doing pretty good there. And then the varsity game starts up. And the first couple plays, I'm still playing 2-man, even though there's third guy out there. I kind of forget sometimes. So it's remembering where I'm at and what I'm doing and what my responsibilities are, and telling myself that before we start.
And
some of the things I got to work on.
Well, and that's the thing too, as a newer official to the sport, and this was a new sport to me, like many lacrosse officials, this wasn't a sport we played. And so you come out and you start working this game. And in some ways, there are advantages to not have having played a sport. Those advantages are, you never think, well, back when I played, this wasn't a foul, right? Fill in the blank. You don't have any of that because you never played. The other thing is determining what truly is sometimes an advantage or a disadvantage for a player when you see the really subtle things that can be fouls. I had a very experienced official tell me, and the longer I do this, the more you realize how right he was. Really good teams foul very subtly, right? The little pushes that actually really meant something and allowed him to get the ball, they won't come up and blow him up and shove him out of bounds. The whole world can see that. They push him just enough so they can get the ball. Well, they disadvantaged him. That's a foul. That's a push. That's a loose push. And other times you have that same contact and it didn't do anything. And knowing that difference is difficult. But the longer you do it, the more that you will get used to that. I mean, often you find yourself as a lead, like you say, in that transition from a 2-man to a 3-man, and you're doing the 10-second count. And you're saying, I'm in a 3-man. I don't need to do that anymore. The single has that 10-second count. But that as the more you do it, the longer you do it, the better at that you will get. But I would be lying if I told you that never happens when you become more of a veteran official, because switching from that 2 to 3, and especially how we do it in lacrosse, those games are back to back. It's not like football, your sub-varsity plays on Thursday and your varsity plays on Friday. In lacrosse, you played the JV game first usually, and then the varsity game, and you're switching 20 minutes later, and that can be a difficult thing to remember.
Yep. No,
But,
I appreciate your time today.
oh well, thanks. Yeah, I'm that's all I've got, and with that, Brent, I'll send it back over to you.
Thanks, Kyle. Appreciate your help with this and your taking the time to present this for our lacrosse officials around the state. Please remember that this is recorded and will be released on July 31st. In addition to that, we have a number of other presentations that are sport specific or that may be related to general officiating, may include things like association membership, recruiting and mentorship, or additional general principles with officiating. Thank you very much and have a good rest of the summer.
All right, goodbye.